Ja, Cthulhu Vertagen, Glui, Muguna Fach, Cthulhu, Rilya, Waga, Nagel Vertagen. Oh, hey there. The solstice is upon us, and however you choose to celebrate the holidays, I always fondly remember it as a time of family traditions. And my family tradition for the holidays was often making peanut brittle. I decided to kick it up a notch and make my own Quinoa brittle. And I'll make peanut brittle as well so that we can compare them. So stick around and find out what's up next. What's up next? I'm Chase W. Beck. I have a PhD in anthropology. Join me as we learn about the different ways food and culture intersect on Dr. Beck's Epicurean Delights. Okay, so in order to make quinoa brittle, of course, we're going to need some quinoa. I also like to add some pumpkin seeds to my quinoa brittle. And then to make the brittle part, we need some sugar, some corn syrup, a little bit of salt, some baking soda. I hope I brought enough. Oh boy. And then I like to season it a little bit with some paprika. Usually I use cayenne pepper, but we didn't have any today. And of course, in order to dissolve that white granulated sugar, you're going to need a little bit of water. But for you guys, I'll make a classic peanut brittle as well, in which case we'll need raw peanuts. It's important that they're raw because they need to cook in the peanut brittle. All right, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to be doing peanuts in one and quinoa in the other. But first we need to make the sugar solution. We gotta cook it down. So we'll add the salt, the water, the sugar, and the corn syrup. And then we'll get these on the stovetop and get them cooking down. We have to boil out most of the water so that we can get the temperature up above what's considered a hard crack phase of sugar cooking. And we want to get it so far that it actually begins to caramelize. And if you've seen my caramel apple episode, you'll know the importance of sugar caramelization for adding flavor to our dishes. So we're going to be trying to do a little bit of caramelization, and then once we get to that temperature, we can add the raw peanuts or the quinoa. But before we add the quinoa, we're going to have to prepare them a little bit by toasting them ever so slightly. So while those are cooking, let's toast up the quinoa. In order to toast up the quinoa, the first thing we need to do is clean it. So we have to get it into a sieve and then cleaned out, because there could be some little powdery bits in here. Now, quinoa apparently grows, as it grows naturally, it has saponins on the outside of the seeds, but most of the quinoa that makes it to the market today has already been washed of those saponins. So really we're just trying to take care of any dust that might have accumulated on the outside. So we're gonna wash those off. All right, so I'm just gonna measure out the quinoa here really quickly. It's about a cup. And a half. We'll get these guys cleaned off, and then we're going to toast them up. So my quinoa is now all clean, but it's also wet and sticky. So we're going to dry it out in this pot over high heat, and that should allow it to get rid of most of its moisture and also pick up a little bit of flavor. It might even pop. That's right, just like popcorn, a lot of these grains and pseudo cereals can pop as well. However, unlike popcorn, popped quinoa is nearly indistinguishable from unpopped quinoa. So we might not be able to tell that it's actually popped once it has. But anyway, once all the moisture has been cooked out of it, it should begin to separate like dry grains, and that's how you know when it's ready. It'll also smell a little bit toasty. So I got the sugar cooking away, and I'm starting to heat up the quinoa. We're not trying to steam it, we're trying to dry it out I'll just keep it moving once it gets hot enough. Although it's not quite there yet. I think I'm going to turn down the sugar a little bit though, because it's quite hot. We want to boil off all the water in the sugar so that it'll begin to caramelize. Gotta get all the liquid out of there. Okay, so we're beginning to get some steam out of the quinoa, which is good. We want it to rise up and leaving our quinoa nice and dry. The quinoa will still retain a little bit of moisture, but we want it to be as dry as if it had not been rinsed off. And if it's not, I don't think it's going to be a big deal because we'll be putting it in the melted sugar. But you don't want it to be so wet that you get like a flash boiling when you add it to the melted sugar once the sugar gets hot. And then you're also going to need to continue to heat the sugar until it reaches that 300-degree phase again. 290 to 300 is what we're shooting for. And let me get back to checking this quinoa. It's going to want to stick, but we'll just keep it moving around. We want this on as high as it's going to go for the quinoa. I'm going to scrape down the sides of this so we get more quinoa on the bottom of the pot than hanging to the outside edges, where hopefully it'll cook just a little bit faster. It's starting to dry out a little bit. I'm starting to hear some pop, starting to smell the quinoa. I'm not sure if you can see anything anymore. It's important to keep it moving around because we're not trying to burn it. We're just trying to toast it a little bit. Turn it down a little bit. Take it off the heat. Do a little bit of this. A little bit of that. See how it's, you might not be able to see it in there, but it's no longer clumping as badly as it was before when it was wet. Oh, lost a little bit. I suppose another method of drying this out would be to lay it out flat on a baking sheet and then put it in the oven on very low for a long time. That might be a method where you're less likely to overcook it or burn it like I am here. But I like the inherent danger, the challenge of not burning it. And also, you get to listen to it pop, if you can get it to pop. Might have to take it out now. I think it might be starting to burn, so it's time for it to come off. Let me just get a dry bowl here to put it in. I got a cold surface here, so I'll just put it in there. It's mostly dry. If we're lucky, it'll continue to dry out as it sits here and cools off. But anyway, if it doesn't dry out entirely, it's not the end of the world. It's just going to mean it's going to take more time for it to get back up to that 290, 300-degree temp that we're looking for in the sugar before we can put it out. Moving here for a little bit to help it dry out. I've never tried microwaving it. I bet I could probably microwave it at a really low temperature, but I think this is probably good enough. Let's see how we're doing on temperature. Guy's ready, it seems. This one, yeah, he's ready too. Look at that. They're both ready. A lot faster than I thought they were going to. Oh, this one's going down. Nope, it's staying up. I think it'll be safer if we do the quinoa in the wider bowl and the peanuts in the deeper bowl. So I'm going to add all that stuff now. So now that we've added the peanuts and the quinoa, the temperatures of the solutions have gone down because of the moisture inside of the raw peanuts and the raw quinoa. So once we get all that cooked out, we'll be in business. And the way you tell is it starts to smell like peanuts. It starts to smell like roasted peanuts. That's how you know your peanuts are ready. Man, I probably shouldn't have done this many peanuts. It looks like I'm gonna have a lot of excess peanuts. We'll have to wait and see though. Quinoa's looking good though. Yeah, so my grandmother's recipe doesn't use any water to get that solution mixed in. And that makes a lot of sense because the more water you add, the longer it takes. Yeah, we're just about at boiling here. I usually don't make the quinoa batch and the peanut batch at the same time. And this is why. I've got quinoa all over my thermometer. Really cooking. Somebody's way too hot. I had to burn the peanuts. Let's see what we got here. Well, the sugar's actually is definitely browning, but I don't think the peanuts are cooked yet. So we're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. Where it gets a little bit dangerous, because you do not want to get any of this stuff on your hands. It's a lot hotter than water, and it's quite sticky. So unlike water, which you could just shake off, this is gonna sit on your hands and just burn away. Think of it as melted cheese, but way worse. I think now's a good time for a botany minute. Quinoa's scientific name is Quinoa quinoa. It is a member of the Amaranthaceae family, along with more well-known plants like spinach and beets. It is known as a pseudo-cereal in that it can be used like and has many of the same characteristics as traditional cereals. What is a cereal? A cereal is not something that comes from a box. It is defined as any grass that is cultivated for its edible grain. So, a cereal grain would be something like rice, wheat, or maize. Quinoa is indigenous to South America and comes from countries like Bolivia and Peru. However, a similar species, Quinoa burlandieri, was cultivated in North America as part of the Eastern Agricultural Complex. Its cultivated form is different from the species that survives today in the wild and is now lost, existing only as archaeological material. Quinoa is described as a powerhouse nutrient because it has all 9 essential amino acids. Our bodies can produce many of the amino acids we need from the food we eat, but the essential amino acids must be obtained directly from our foods. Many crops, like beans and maize, contain some and in combination provide all of the essential amino acids, but quinoa by itself can provide all of them, making it a complete protein. Anthropology alert. In 2015, Dr. Cedric Habiyarimi and his team of researchers at Washington State University explored the use of quinoa as a complementary crop for regions suffering from hunger and malnutrition. They found 15 varieties of quinoa that could grow in adverse conditions and used quinoa, as well as other crops like millet, sorghum, fonio, barley, and oat, to supplement the traditional crops grown in Rwanda. Dr. Habiyarimi's program was initially begun with 12 farmers, but by May of 2020, more than 500 individuals were involved. Cedric was motivated not only by his personal experience growing up in a refugee camp in Tanzania, but also by the reality that food insecurity and malnutrition were not happening because people were not farming enough, but because people were not farming the right crops. It seems as if quinoa and similar plants have potential to become the perfect accompaniment to traditional and indigenous crops and diets throughout. It looks like the brittles are just about finished. As soon as they cool off, we'll be able to try them out. And don't worry if you are unable to follow along with the video, because if you look at the description below, you'll see a full list of instructions for how to make these brittles yourself. And while you're there, please take the time to subscribe to my channel and like the video, and leave a comment if you got something to say. Okay, so now I have both of my brittles ready to try out. I have the classic peanut brittle right here, and I have my variation, the Quinoa Pumpkin Seed Brittle. I should tell you that when I developed this recipe, I was so proud of myself. I did the research and I found out that you could puff quinoa, and that I figured that if you could puff it, then you could probably eat it in a brittle. And so I tried it out, and I was so proud of myself for figuring out this recipe. And then I looked it up online, and somebody else had already done it before, so I was kind of disappointed. But doesn't mean it's not delicious. I'm going to try out the regular peanut brittle first, so I have a nice comparison. It tastes just like I remember. It's rich. It's got that bold peanut flavor. It's wonderful. The caramel in there is developed, but not overwhelming. Let's try the quinoa brittle. Honestly, I believe it could use a little bit more spice, a little bit more capsaicin. So I'll have to try to up the amount of cayenne that I put in there next time. Regardless, it's delicious. I love the airiness, the pop that you get from that puffed quinoa. It reminds me a lot of like a puffed rice cereal or a chocolate covered puffed rice bar, but this is in caramelized sugar. It's got great flavor, and I think both of these actually complement each other wonderfully. And you can take a little break from the richness of the high fat content of the peanuts for some puffy, airy, protein, carby quinoa. So take a chance, try it out yourself. I think you'll be very satisfied. I'll catch you next time on Dr. Beck's Epicurean Delights.